what would you say
Then,
about the person in general? So say this person theoretically exists. What would you say
okay.
about the person? Would you
Uh,
think that person's a liar?
mm,
Like, all right, here's a scenario. Somebody that made it further in
no,
mathematics than you did came to a different conclusion. What do you do with that information? Do you say, this dude's an idiot? He doesn't understand the math? Or do you
I
say
mean,
he's lying and he actually does believe it?
I mean,
Because that's the idea you're putting out.
me saying he would be lying goes against the hypothetical, because the hypothetical is that I already know that he has this PhD.
All right, can I ask this real quick? I don't have to, Rigor. I mean, you can keep going back and forth. I don't have to like jump in. I just say this one thing though. Are you basically? It sounds like Embo, you're saying that some math is exclusive to the globe model, and if that's the case, I've never really heard that argument. I mean, I know people throw out the math and know you guys. If you know, I've heard people say things like, "Oh, if you knew the math, you'd be a glober." I know that kind of stuff. But do you have anything right now that you could present that, like, hey, this math without any pre-assumptions? I mean, if you use math with pre-assumptions, that's a different story. Like, if I use math of like, you know, I always use this example. Let's say, you know, I have a broken window on my house as an example, a hypothetical. And if I say, oh, well, you know, I bet Superman flew into my window in the middle of the night, I could cook up a bunch of math that shows how Superman ran into the window, the speed he was going, you know, et cetera. And I could say, there it is. That's the math. It proves that it was Superman. But obviously that wouldn't prove it's Superman. That's just one way to use the math. Now, if I had some math that was exclusive to something, that's a different story. Like, you know, so do you have anything that is exclusive? Because it sounds like you're pretty much making an argument that there's some math out there that you think exists that makes it exclusive that the Earth is a sphere. And I know you probably wouldn't say that science proves things or whatever. I mean, even though they do say that there's proof in math. So you're basically kind of like skating even on the mainstream that math proves things, you know, and certain formulas and things, and that's exclusive to the globe, that it proves the globe. Is that an argument that you're kind of leaning towards? And if so, I mean, you know, present that. But if it has assumptions and, you know, applying it to models arbitrarily, then it's not going to work for being exclusive.
Okay, so at first I wanted to say that it's impossible to do math without assumptions, because you already have to start with what, for example, the definitions mean, like let's say what a circle means and so on. That's the most basic assumptions. So the problem is not that we make assumptions, but what kind of assumptions would we all accept, what all sides would accept, and then we can work with that. And I think that if you take assumptions that flat earthers commonly accept in the debate, then you could formulate an argument like that. And an example of that would be something like that in any direction you travel towards the ground position of a star, the sky will be tilting at 1 degree per 16 optical miles, regardless of what point on Earth do you start from. I think that's an argument that would prove the Earth is spherical if you already accept that, and I've heard many flat earthers accept that as a premise for celestial navigation. So that would be an example. I don't know if you're responding, but if not, then I can add that for that you have to assume that for any latitude and longitude, the angles to the stars would be indeed the ones that you would calculate from spherical geometry. Like if you open Stellarium, then Stellarium is going to be pretty much accurate. And you have to assume that this 1 degree per 16 optical miles relationship holds. And the reason why I'm assuming that is because, again, flat earthers like assuming that because that's necessary for celestial navigation. Like celestial theodolite, for example, uses Stellarium for their angles.
All right. Well, I was only just trying to interject briefly because I was kind of back and forth from my mic, as I often am. So I wasn't like sitting right here to fully engage. I thought I was just, because Rigor was going back and forth with you, I thought I was just jumping in to try to kind of see if I could help get to that further point, that in terms of what you think is exclusive in terms of math for a globe Earth. And then I did hear part of your response there, but if I was going to respond, I'd have to like listen more intently, and because I know what you're referring to in terms of celestial navigation. But I thought it was more in the category of like of relativity and you know, in terms of the math for gravity and so on, that I thought that you were more alluding to rather than celestial navigation. But I mean, I could either try to listen more intently. I can understand you with your accent, but I have to take an extra step like when I listen to really make sure I'm getting every word. So
Relativity is kind of a different case because unlike celestial navigation, with celestial navigation, flat earthers accept the assumptions that it makes because they don't really understand that they imply the Earth is a globe. That's why they do it. But it's much more intuitive and simple to understand that an idea that mass attracts mass is going to make the Earth into a globe. And that's why most flat earthers don't even accept gravity as a real thing, but they just reject its truth altogether. So it's not really a case of them accepting it and not understanding that it leads to a globe. It is the case of them rejecting the evidence in the first place, rejecting this assumption that gravity is true. So I don't think I can use the same way proof in that case, where it would be just a logical proof, where you take the assumptions and they then show how they conclude the globe. But in that case, I would have to present the evidence that gravity is true. Like, let's say, the measurements of gravitational constant, and I can obviously do that, but it would be a different kind of a proof. It would be more of evidence than a proof.
all right, well, I'm not refuting any of that at the moment, but go ahead.
I don't even know what you're trying to say. It's almost like you're trying to say the math dictates reality. I'm gonna say no. The math is derived from reality, and it can be wrong and still explain it really, really good, like really good.
Yeah, it can
But
still
it can
apply.
Still be wrong.
Yeah,
Right.
it can apply.
Which is-
Apply. Would you say like it can apply but still be wrong ultimately?
Yeah, like it comes after the observation. Like it doesn't come, like it's not like, all right, well, let's do all this on paper and we'll make this reality. It's like, no, we're just trying to figure out reality. And sometimes we get it close and the method's just completely wrong. Like just wrong, fundamentally wrong on how we even conceptualize it, or like we see it. It's just completely broken. But for some reason it brought us to the conclusion where it's like, holy shit, that was pretty close to what reality does.
Of course,
Okay.
Gio's math with the Superman metaphor, it could have been perfect. You could have had perfect math with the Superman metaphor, and it could have been internally consistent. That doesn't mean Superman exists, but if you presuppose Superman exists, and you have good maths that if Superman exists, this would be the case, but you don't have Superman existing first. You have maths that would be consistent if Superman existed.
Okay, but then
Yeah.
this math wouldn't explain reality accurately because we don't observe Superman.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It doesn't actually explain reality. It explains
Okay.
something, just not reality, and it's pretty close.
Okay, no, it's not close at all because there's
Well, how do you
nothing
know it's
close
not
in
close?
reality to something that. What's something that's close to Superman in reality?
Well, now you're just saying Newton isn't close to Einstein.
But again, that's a completely different thing. We're
We're just
resetting
comparing.
now.
We're just comparing math.
Yeah, but in that case, this math is very close in results. That's the point. That it gives the same results. But the spherical and flat Earth, they don't give the same results. Not even
That's a
close.
pragmatic fallacy. So
What's
it
that?
has no weight. Yeah, it's called a pragmatic fallacy. It has no weight. It's not an argument.
What does it mean?
Just look up pragmatic fallacy.
So you can't explain it because you want to, appear smart because you know a word.
No.
You're saying you're
Pragmatic
putting
fallacy.
it's like putting the cart before the horse, right?
He's saying just because it works or it has benefits in reality, that means it's true. It's a pragmatic fallacy. Doesn't matter if it works. That doesn't make it true. Doesn't matter if it's helpful, useful, etc. And also, it's in the words, right? If you know what the word pragmatic means.
Pragmatic.
In practice, it's basically in practice.
Utility,
Close is close.
practicality. Just because it's internally consistent, just because the maths for Superman, show that this would be the case if Superman existed, and just because it works within the paradigm that Superman exists, doesn't mean that Superman exists. I'm using Gio's metaphor.
Okay, I read about what this fallacy means, and it doesn't mean whatever I said at all. It means that you basically didn't establish a correlation between what you're claiming and the effect you're observing, and you're only going off the fact that you observed this effect because you did this thing that you think is correlated. But in my example, you can actually prove that celestial navigation comes from a globe. It's not just like assuming the Earth is a globe and then doing that. You can actually show that the math assumes the Earth to be a globe. It's not like completely baselessly correlated. You can actually prove that that one comes from another. So this is just how would I say it? Non sequitur. If you want to play with fallacies, that would be a non sequitur fallacy.
Not playing with fallacies. The thing you said had to do with the truth value of globe or proving that it's a sphere. And then the way you substantiated it was it works, it has function. Just because it's internally consistent doesn't mean it's true. It's not non sequitur. And it's an error in reasoning. That's what a fallacy is. If you're saying your reasoning doesn't have error, just state your reasoning. Don't try to point out the error in someone else's reasoning. That's another fallacy.
Okay. So can you give me like some time, and I will prepare the proof.
Proof. Also, I like proof.
Yeah, you pointing out someone's reasoning. Is that what you just said? You're doing exactly that, man.
I know. I was thinking the same thing.
I didn't say pointing out an error in reasoning is a fallacy. I said if you point out an error in reasoning rather than addressing your error, that is another fallacy.
Yeah,
I know
you're losing. You're losing. So
I know,
you're calling
you
fallacy.
guys.
Yeah.
Look, two people address me, so I can reply to both of you, right? I know you guys like to glob on and cheerlead, but you guys have nothing without someone else debating and you globbing on to whatever they're saying.
It doesn't change the fact that you're bailing out on fallacy.
I haven't bailed out on anything, and what you're doing right now is called 2K. You guys don't understand what debate is. You don't have any arguments.
More fallacious reasoning.
And you're not a
All right,
literature teacher.
what's the
Stop
error in
acting
my
like one.
reasoning, Left Lane? What's the error in my reasoning?
You're wrong about everything.
That's
You're
what I was going to
wrong
ask. but
about
my goodness,
everything.
dude.
Thanks.
That's
You sound
you
stupid.
can't just say that.
Wow, Left Lane, that was great.
Yeah, well said, man. You really contribute a lot
Well,
to the discussion.
that's all you're fucking doing, man. You're just saying, "Oh no, you're wrong," and here's the fallacy reason why, and then you do fallacious reasoning to come to that conclusion. You're
Yeah, I
committing
said
fallacy.
you're wrong. I said you're wrong. Here's the reason why. Then you said you're wrong, and I said, okay, what's the reason? You just said, oh, you're wrong about everything. That makes you sound stupid.
Now you're going to ad hom.
If you say that I'm wrong about everything, right? That's an ad hom because you're not talking about my reasoning.
Yeah, evidently, by definition, you're wrong about everything.
All right. Well, what
Thanks for
is
the
he actually
brilliant
wrong
contribution,
about?
Dr.
Why
Left
is he
Lane.
wrong?
The only
Okay,
people
so-
that get defensive when you point out an error in reasoning are people that operate in extreme errors in reasoning. See, Left Lane said I had an error in my reasoning. I would be happy to look at it, but he didn't point out anything. He just said, you're just wrong about everything. Yeah.
But you breezed right past me explaining why you were wrong in your reasoning, and then you were calling it a fallacy for doing exactly what you were doing. You breezed right. See, here's the thing: the conversation is now turned to fallacy. Instead of talking about a particular subject or a topic and explaining the reasons why we have these facts that we know and understand. Now we're talking about fallacy and
That's because
and
you
formal
and
debate.
Cole.
And we're on fucking Discord talking
That's
about.
because you and Cole decided to chime in and say I had an error in my reasoning. When I pointed out an error in Embo's reasoning, and he said he'll look at it, then you guys go, "Oh, you're just doing the same thing."
I'm out. Go
Now
ahead.
you're
Talk
both,
about
you're
fallacy
both
if you want.
trying to interrupt me, and you guys
Hold on.
chimed in to say, "Oh, no, you're doing the same thing you're accusing him of doing." No, it's a 2K fallacy, right? That's when you say no, you. So someone points out an error in your reasoning, you're like, "Oh no, you have an error in your reasoning." You know what I did? I justified what I said. You know what you did? You made a baseless assertion. That's why I said that makes you look stupid.
Yes, because the only people that run around interrupting conversations with saying, oh, you're committing a fallacy is people who think they are so much smarter than everyone else that they can just tell other people that they're thinking wrong. Yet never, ever do you consider how many fallacies you commit.
I asked,
show how you're
where's
thinking
the
wrong.
error in my reasoning? You can point it out, and I'll look at it with you. Where's the error?
The error in your reasoning is thinking you're so intelligent that you can play literature teacher and tell other people where all their fallacies lay, yet you never point out your own. There's the error in your reasoning.
Okay, where's the error in the reasoning? Now you're
I just
divining
told
what
you.
my mind now you're divining what my mind is going through. That has nothing to do with reasoning. Do you know what reasoning is? The error in your reasoning is that you think you're always right. That's what you said. You guys sound
error
so
in your
stupid.
reasoning is you don't agree with them. That is the error. That's what they see your error to be. You do not agree with them.
Do you guys see, like, does the audience see how there's like zero substance in what they're saying? So like if there's not someone debating me and they can't cheerlead, all they can do is say you're wrong. You know, you think you're right all the time. You always point out errors in others' reasonings. You're not saying anything. Where's
neither
the
are
error?
you. All you're doing is interrupting a good conversation to say something stupid because you think you're more intelligent than you are.
Wrong. That's what you and Left Lane are doing. I was having a conversation with Embo,
think that-
and he said my contribution was so useful that he's gonna go get proof. What you
Because
and
he's a
Left Lane
nice
then
guy.
did, what you and Left Lane then did was you chimed in to start insulting me and saying, "Oh, you always call out fallacies." Oh, it turns out it helped the man reason and develop his reasoning.
No, he said it because he's
Yeah.
a nice guy, and everybody that has intelligence probably agrees with me on Left Lane.
All right, we are never going to not discuss fallacies. So if it's not your preference, this may not be the place for you, especially when we're having debates. There's never going to be a day that we're just going to flush all the fallacies down the toilet and just run around and shout at each other. We're never going to do that ever, especially when it's a debate environment. You know what I mean? Like if it's just discussion, it's not really the same thing. But if it's like a debate where there's points on the table, you know, sword sharpening swords, iron sharpening iron, we're trying to get to important things. It's very important. Now, you know, to discuss them. However, of course, it could be misused. They could be used as tactics. There's all that possibility too. But what I heard happen there was that Galatrax, they were in the really good, rich content in terms of the math and all those components. He brought up the pragmatic fallacy. Embo hadn't heard of it. Embo was, from what I heard, pretty intellectually honest. He's like, oh, what is that? Okay. He looked it up quickly. And then he kind of said, well, is that really what I'm doing? I don't think it is. But then Galatrax rebutted. And then Embo actually said, okay, well, actually, let me look into this more. I have to go actually read what this is to make sure. That's pretty intellectually honest. And then seems like, I don't know, Left Lane and Cole came in just kind of trying to like throw shade and be like, no, fallacy, you can't use fallacies. And then that whole thing that just like the last like 3 minutes were kind of all over the place. So, ironically, Left Lane was saying that the fallacies were the problem. But then Left Lane said he did an ad hom fallacy. So like you're using the fallacy, you're calling it a fallacy. That's because they're useful. And Cole, you do that too. Cole sometimes will be like, that's a fallacy. I don't know what it is, but it's a fallacy. So he admits too that is useful because you have to get through the gateway or the blockage if there's a fallacy there to even proceed in the logic and in the intellectual argumentation. That's why it's important. Go ahead, Left Lane.
There was no fallacy there. It's my point.
What's
well,
pragmatic
I
fallacy,
explained.
Hold on.
Hold on.
Let me-
Fallacy, please, Left Lane.
Can I say this one other thing and I'll completely pass it? Left Lane, the other thing I want to say, when you were doing that, like you didn't, from what I heard, you didn't really rebut the content. Like you didn't say like, okay, it's not a pragmatic fallacy because XYZ. You know what I mean? The only thing you said to Galatrax was like, you're just wrong about everything. And that's actually a hasty generalization fallacy. And probably other ones too. That was the only thing you rebutted with. You know what I'm saying? You just said, you're just wrong about everything. Like you would have had to say, hey, Galatrax, it's not a pragmatic fallacy because, you know, the math, the celestial navigation. You see what I'm saying? Like in order to actually have moved it forward.
He did explain himself, and he continued to call it a fallacy.
Yeah, but yeah, look, this is kind of what happened, right? So Embo was talking with me, right? I was trying to explain how it's fallacious, right? His reasoning, with examples, not calling it a fallacy. Geo came in. He did the same. He attempted to do the same thing with the Superman analogy. Then I went back with Embo and tried to do it again, just maybe in a little bit different way and point out where it becomes fallacious. And then Galley stepped in and just called out the fallacy. And then everybody jumped on Galley. But me and Geo were explaining the fallacy, like trying to break it down in a different way. Galley just used the proper word. And then Embo's like, oh, it's actually a fallacy. Let me go check it out.
Yeah, the
So
most
wasn't
logical man I
understanding
know
the
doesn't
example
know
that
the technical terms for all these things. The most logical man I know is a farmer. He doesn't know modus tollens, modus ponens. He doesn't know the fallacies. He's the most logical person I know. You don't need to know the names of them. You can point them out in other ways. But yeah, if someone has an error in their reasoning, they should be thankful when someone points it out because everyone should want their reasoning to get better. And no, I don't make baseless assertions. I said what it was. I explained how he was doing it. And the response was, oh, you're just shutting him down by saying fallacy and you're just baselessly asserting that. No, I justified it. And the response was baseless assertions. Neither Cole nor Left Lane could justify how my reasoning had errors. So they just say, you're wrong. You think you're smarter than everybody. I don't think I'm smarter than anybody in here.
Yada, 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 man.
Yeah, notice how he doesn't address my point.
Yeah, you're just running your mouth.
I'll
Did you
address
hear
your point.
Embo explained how he wasn't being fallacious? What about
He
that
actually didn't say he wasn't being fallacious.
Oh, yes,
Now
he
you're
did.
misrepresenting what happened. Hey, Left Lane,
yes, he
what's a
did.
pragmatic fallacy and how did I use it wrong?
I'm not going into it. It's bullshit. That's all. It's bullshit.
Oh, come on.
Yep, that makes you a coward. You just want to chant and baselessly assert stuff in the background like a cheerleader.
No,
You
dude,
don't
no,
justify anything you say.
I don't
All
want
you want to do
bullshit
is
in the combo.
chant.
I want
All
to hear
you want to do
facts.
is chant and baselessly assert. You're the one who actually ruins conversations.
Embo, did you explain yourself and how it wasn't fallacious?
Embo's deafened because he's looking into what I said, which is what he said he was going to do. He didn't say he didn't use the fallacy. You just lied about that.
Yeah,
No, he
you don't
did.
want
He
to.
did explain.
Hold on. You don't want to hear cheerleaders, and we don't want to hear student teachers.
Okay, more baseless assertions. Where's the error in my reasoning? Still waiting.
All right, I got a question because this sucks. All right, how can two objects in a liquid state collide into each other, exchange parts of each other, and be made up of a different composition than each other?
Okay, hold on. That's a good question. If we're going to shift into something that's more content based and not like sort of the meta stuff, Embo did go on deafen, so I don't know if we're going to get further. But can I just say before we totally shift, I'm glad you brought like a real point up so we can shift. But can I just say on the last thing, Embo did. I think he quickly looked up the pragmatic fallacy and he might have read like the first sentence and he kind of quickly like was like, I didn't do that. But then when Galatrax brought it up more thoroughly to him, he was like, well, let me actually look into this. I'll have to research it. So it's like he kind of rebutted it, but not really. It sounded like he kind of pulled back and said he didn't like concede really, but he kind of pulled back and said, okay, let me go try to look into it more. And so on. I want to say that, but the other thing, like Cole and left lane, can I just ask you guys? You can just be a yes or no, really, unless you want to give a short response, and then we can shift to whatever else, or Rigor if you want to continue with that. But let's say we had debates going. The winner wins $1,000 per debate. We're having debates every day. The winner gets $1,000. We have a whole panel of judges. We have moderators and judges, and we have 10,000 live viewers. Okay, so there's 10,000 people watching live. The winner gets $1,000 per debate. We're doing them every day. Okay, in that example, Cole and left lane, do you guys think that fallacies would be very important? Do you think that the judging panel, you know, the if there's like kind of like a court, if you have the judge and then a jury, that kind of setup, do you guys think that having a thorough list of fallacies and having a way that people could call them out if needed and so on, do you guys think that that would be at the top of the list to have? Or do you think that you would just throw away all the fallacies, flush them in the toilet, throw them in the garbage, and just kind of wing it? Like, what is your take on that?
Yes, if the judge was fair, if he was trained in fallacies and trained in literature and debates, and if he was equal on both sides.
Agree.
Okay, now that's fine, but we're all doing our best right now. Meaning that like if somebody was being paid a full-time salary and they were to become an expert in that way, and that was the one person, like the one judge, or if you had like a panel of like 8 judges and they were all heavily researched and they were trusted and confirmed and verified, all that stuff, and that everybody in the debate, all the listeners, they knew the fallacies, just like when you play sports, you know, you've got the the rules and the penalties and all that stuff, right? And there's a reason they have the penalties, and then the referees do their best, and so on. So I hear you on that. But in this somewhat more informal environment where we have an open live stream that's running all the time, people have different lifestyles, they're running in and out different times of the day. Doesn't it make sense that whoever is in the discussion or somebody who is knowledgeable or who is going to say a particular fallacy can bring that up? Like, why is that problematic? Whether it's someone in here, whether a moderator or not, doesn't even have to be a moderator or not, because it's not really, in a somewhat more informal. So it's not even, I mean, if we did debates in here that had the moderators, then perhaps they could be the ones that are doing that. And often it is even in here too, but nonetheless, it's not really about like who gets server muted or anything. It's not that kind of thing. So yeah. So what is the issue with that?
Because if you, like you said, if you want to use a referee in sports, you don't pick the referee off of one side of the one team on one side and then him only call fouls on the opposite side. That's exactly what we see. It ain't fallacies being called on both sides. It's only fallacies being called against Globers over and over and over when it's blatantly obvious that fallacies going on both sides, but the other side never gets called. It's only the Glober side that ever gets called out for fallacies. It stops the conversation. It stops the flow of the conversation. It interrupts everything. It makes people forget what their talking points and everything else for simple things that are not major enough to stop the conversation for.
It's a tactic.
That's the case. If flat earthers are the only ones
Error
calling
reasoning
out
is pretty major.
fallacies, by the way, I don't claim to be a flat earther, but if flat earthers are the only ones calling out fallacies, that sounds like a Glober problem. They should be calling out when someone has an error in reasoning. But actually, what it turns out is you and left lane don't know what errors in reasoning are. You don't know that. You just say, that's not an error in reasoning. You just baselessly assert that. So I asked you, what's the error in my reasoning? And you guys just baselessly assert, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. When I point out someone has an error in their reasoning, I tell them what the error is, why I perceive it to be an error, and allow them to rebut it. When you guys do it, you just baselessly chant, oh, well, you're wrong. You think you're so much smarter than everybody. Well, if you could point out errors in reasoning, you would too.
Yeah, I mean, Cole, I mean, in terms of like the sides or whatever, I don't really think that's true. I think that folks bring up fallacies in many, on either side, quote unquote, as it were. I mean, that happens frequently. So I've heard people, it goes both ways. But I mean, in this somewhat more informal open panel live stream environment, it would make sense that whoever's in the conversation would say, hey, that's a fallacy. And then the other person could rebut it. Yes, it is. No, it's not, which is pretty much what happened. Galatrax brought that up. Embo first kind of looked, he didn't quite know what it was. He had never heard of the pragmatic fallacy. He obviously quickly Googled it. He read the first sentence or two. He kind of did a little light rebuttal, but he didn't really have an ability to rebut it. And then he said, I'm going to go research this and look into it, which I think is pretty intellectually honest, at least that part of it. Now, he is on deafen. I don't know if that's what he's doing right now or not, but he said he was going to do that. So, I mean, I don't see what the issue is when it's in an informal thing. And the thing is, if you get called out for a fallacy, you're given the chance to rebut it. Like, we're not just calling people out fallacies and then muting them or kicking them or anything like that. Like, we're not doing that. So the person can have their full time to say, well, no, it's not a fallacy because X, Y, Z. And I would just think that you guys would be supportive of that. Now, again, if fallacies are being used as a tactic or in some problematic way, that could be a problem. But that's not what happened here. Like, he brought up the pragmatic fallacy and it was something that was on the table. And then lastly, I mean, Cole, I've heard you say, like, when you're in sometimes a heated debate, you'll say, oh, that's a fallacy. I don't know what it is, but it is a fallacy. Now, I understand if you don't know what the name of it is, that's fine. Or even if you can't articulate it, it's a little bit problematic because it'd be better to know which one you're calling out. But you know the feeling of being in a debate or a discussion and something, even though if you don't know what it is or how to describe it, that's fine. But at least you know something triggered you I don't mean triggered like emotional. I just mean something tripped the wire in your brain to be like, okay, that is logically fallacious. And it is problematic because you can't really move forward in an actual argument when there's a fallacy. You know, that's why, like, ad homs, if I just respond with insulting you, like, where do you go from there? Like, you can't even move forward. So, I mean, I've heard you kind of call them out yourself. So, I mean, can't you see from your own experience that is, useful?
Because the only reason that I've only done it once or twice, the only reason that I do that is just because you guys do it. And I do it almost as a joke or as just
ironically.
because you guys do the same thing.
If I may,
If you guys
Cole,
didn't do it, I would never do it.
Cole, if I may, okay, in the nature of argumentation, you need to get the plumbing right, which is the logic at that point, or however you want to refer to it, right? Or your reasoning. Pointing out faulty reasoning is the equivalent. I believe that you understand how to build and design a coal mine. Presumably with any sort of thing underground, you've got an exhaust pipe, an air intake, and an air exhaust. Now, they need to be placed in appropriate locations or else they don't serve their proper function, right? If you put the air exhaust right next to the air intake, they're only going to circulate over one side. You need it at either end of the chamber, or I don't know the exact layout of things, right? But you want to create a flow of air and exchange it all. That's the equivalent of what this pointing out fallacies is like saying that your exhaust pipe and your air intake pipe are right next to each other and they're not serving the proper function in the overall design of keeping the place safe and air circulating. Does that make sense?
No, what makes sense to me is we're on Discord trying to talk and have conversations. And when you derail the conversation and start hollering fallacy, all you do is you mess up everybody's thoughts and derail the conversation. And you make it boring.
That's the
to
thing,
listen
though.
to.
Me calling out
That's all that
fallacy
happens.
didn't derail the
And
conversation.
I
You
don't-
definitely getting hung up on it did.
And I don't think, no, it derailed it because he didn't even know what you was meaning by it, because English is not his first language. And I don't think that
figured out what
most
it
people
meant and
listening.
said he's going to go see if he's doing that. And then what derailed the conversation was you in left lane whining that his point wasn't good.
Okay, thank you for interrupting, but I don't think that most people listening wants to hear what a fallacy is or what somebody thinks a fallacy is. They want to hear the conversation. I do.
But that is the conversation. Like, I wouldn't say, okay, if somebody is using it as a tactic in some way, meaning like if they don't have the explanation as to why it's a fallacy, or they're just calling it out without, I mean, that, like, there's different things that could be derailing maybe, or if someone's using it like in some way to distract from the point. But I would think, but if it's being done correctly, it's more like pausing the conversation to get things in order. It's like if you're driving down the road in your car and you hear a crazy noise in your engine, you might need to pull off, take a break, take a look at what's going on, open the hood and see what's up. You know what I mean? So it's just pausing the conversation for a moment, and I do kind of agree with Galatrax. Like, he did bring that fallacy up. There was something going on there. And then I'm not trying to like call you guys out, but I'm just saying it seems like Cole and Left Lane, you guys did kind of start on this like a little bit like attacking and kind of somewhat, I'm trying to be respectful, like kind of drama oriented, like Galatrax thinks he's smarter and this, which is another like ad hom kind of thing. So I mean, to me, that I kind of agree that that's sort of what more derailed a little bit, because if we just stick with the fallacies, it's more just pausing the conversation, like Ricksky was saying, to kind of get things in order. Like, oh, let's make sure the exhaust pipe is working. Let's make sure everything is in order. And if everybody can kind of keep calm about it, I think it can be productive. And like I said, what's the alternative? Just don't ever talk about fallacies at all. And that's why I said before, like, I mean, if you really don't want to have fallacies part of debate, we're not going to just throw them out and never discuss them.
Okay, well, that's fine, but let's see just how many fallacies gets called out on your side, Gio, from now on.
Yeah,
And also,
seems
here's the
like
thing.
you
Here's
just
the thing.
want your guy.
If
the guy
we're going to
on your
talk about
side,
fallacies all the
just-
time, I'm going to leave and I won't come back if that's all we're going to do is talk fallacy. I'm not here to listen.
No.
Oh, I'm
The
so down
fallacy
for that.
discussion.
I'm so down. Anyway, it seems like you guys want people on your side to be able to make fallacious points, errors in their reasoning without being called out. Because if you could call out errors in flat earthers' reasoning, the side you perceive to be against you, you would. Why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you call out errors in the reasoning of the people you view as your opponent? Why wouldn't you do that?
Could I
Do all
answer
the
that?
time.
Not
ahead.
interested, Jesse.
Well, could I
Yeah,
say
I
something
mean,
to the
Left
room?
Lane, you even called a fallacy on Galatrax at one point. You said an ad hom. Whether that was substantiated or not is another question, but it was a little chaotic there, so maybe there was a slight ad hom. But either way, I mean, you called one out. So it's not really like the fallacies themselves could just be discussed briefly. They're just part of the argumentation. I think it's more like maybe the meta, like we've been doing the last little bit. That is less productive. I mean, well, it's productive for like the etiquette of the conversation, but I mean, just like you can't go to like a hockey game and be like, I'm not going to listen to the ref telling me that I did a penalty. You know what I mean? Like, if you're going to play by the rules, like there's some rules and logic. And in this case, there's kind of certain etiquette in debate. And if somebody, Left Lane, if you put forth an argument and somebody just insults you, I would hope you'd call out an ad hom fallacy. And I would hope that whoever else is in here would substantiate that and agree. And then ideally the person who did it could say, okay, I apologize. That is an ad hoc. Let me actually put an argument together instead of attacking your person instead of the argument. So, I mean, I would hope that would happen. Doesn't mean we have to talk about fallacies for 5 hours every day, but it just means that, you know, if they're tools in the toolbox that we have to be aware of for argumentation to be clear and concise. And so we can get to more knowledge and information and truth.
Yeah, but you're sort of presupposing that all these fallacy callouts are legitimate, which 90% of the time they're illegitimate. It's a tactic when they don't have a response to the facts that are being laid out. That's what my problem is with it. And Jesse was going to respond. I'd like to hear what he said.
All right. Well, I hear you, but okay. All right. Well, if Jesse's going to go, but I mean, okay, then do you have a rebuttal for Embo's thing being for not being a pragmatic fallacy?
No, he was giving reasoning to why he had drawn his conclusion, and he mentioned that it's about presenting a cause without presenting effect, or presenting an effect without presenting a cause, something like that. But yeah, he did defend his point, and I don't know. Then he dropped out for some reason.
He said he's going to go look at it and bring us some proof, to which I replied, good, I like proof, because he wanted to look at what I said to him. You just missed that part, or you're selectively not talking about it. But he specifically said, I'm going to consider that and come back with proof. But it's not a tactic, by the way. I don't like when you accuse people of just, oh, you're doing that because it's a tactic. If you could point out errors in reasoning, you would. You can't.
You do it religiously. You're all the time calling out fallacy and going
Oh
on.
no, in debate, someone's
about
pointing out errors in someone's reasoning. Oh, why is somebody in a debate
It's
pointing out errors
habitual.
in other
It's
people's reasoning?
habitual.
That's crazy. It's crazy to point out the error in the opposite side's reasoning in a debate. Why would someone do that?
I don't know. When me and SE was talking a while ago, I could have pointed out 20 times that I thought that he had errors in his reasoning, but did I? No, because it doesn't progress the conversation.
It's not about necessarily only progressing the conversation. People are here for all sorts of different reasons. It sounds to me like you guys are saying you don't like the slowdown of the conversation. I mean, conversating is nice. It's fun. It can be fun. Yeah, it can be a little bit annoying to use fallacy calling out, but there's no difference between, I'm trying to say here, what you're after, what you're seeking here as far as the experience is not the same as everyone else's, right? And it's not always going to be the same. You have to kind of put up with that a little bit, right?
Why would anyone complain in a debate setting that an error in reasoning is being pointed out? I think they would complain about an error in reasoning being pointed out if they have shitty reasoning.
Or if they want to get away with using the fallacies and not actually face them and rebut them and just, I'm not saying these guys did that, but at the moment, so I'm not trying to start a thing. I'm just saying like Galatrax, if I okay, let's say we're having a debate and I just totally ad hom you, and then you're like, oh, Gio, that's an ad hom. If I said to you, oh, what the hell, you're just using fallacy. I mean, that would be me potentially avoiding, you know what I mean? Being like, oh, I did use an ad hom. Yeah, that's problematic. I shouldn't attack your person. I should actually respond. I'm just saying that's one reason. Maybe people would be like, don't look here. Don't look at these fallacies. But yeah.
I definitely think people use fallacies wrong, man. Like I'll say it, like people use fallacies as a tactic. For example, someone can make an awesome argument and say, that's why I think what you're saying is stupid. And then someone will totally ignore the argument and go, that's an ad hom, you said I'm stupid. Like, that's using a fallacy wrong, because an ad hom is an insult in place of an argument. It's not an insult adjacent to an argument. So, like, yeah, people do use them wrong. But that doesn't mean that every time someone calls out an error in reasoning, especially every time against your side, doesn't mean that they have an error in their reasoning. So like if I have an error in my reasoning when I say, hey, that's a pragmatic fallacy, super easy to point out. Say it's not that because it follows like this. If this, then that, therefore this. It's an argument, right? Super simple. Any debate needs to have good reasoning on both sides, good logic on both sides.
Well, I would actually debate you someday on the adjacent ad hom thing, but we could do that. I went into that with Ruhif a while ago. Because like I'll just say it briefly. Let's say you say something, an argument to me, and then I come back with, you're stupid, or that's stupid, or whatever, and then I give a response. I still think that's still an ad hom. It's an ad hom plus a response. Now, I know the idea like, oh, an ad hom is in replacement of an argument, meaning if I just insulted you and then I said nothing more, yes, that would be just like a clean, pure ad hominem right there. But if I start out with, well, you're a this, that, and the other, or insult your character, or degrade you, or put you down, or do some kind of thing, and then I give some kind of somewhat half rebuttal thing, to me, that's just an ad hom and like a half argument. You know, it's just an ad hom and an argument, even though I understand the idea that ad hom's in replacement of an argument. But if it's my turn to get the mic and the first thing I do is I insult you, then I'm using my mic time to do an ad hom. So I just still think it's an ad hom. You know, it's just an ad hom.
What
Plus
if it's in the other order?
The ad hom is to the man, so it has to be a specific thing where it's only attacking the person, their character, their motive, the traits, like Cole and Left Lane did. That would be an ad hom. It would be the character, the motive, the traits, right, of the person making an argument instead of addressing the substance of the argument. So yeah, I guess if you start out with you're stupid and then that was isolated and chopped off, that'd be an ad hom. But if you say like, you lay out, here's an argument, here's a point, here's the justification for it, premise 1, premise 2, conclusion, and then you say, that's why I think you're not making a good representation, that's not a good argument, that's a stupid argument. That you already have the addressing of the argument, and then you have the the thing that, addresses the character of the person. And I mean, in debate, you are addressing the credibility of the person. You're addressing their credibility. You're addressing their intelligence. You're addressing their reasoning. It's not just like, we're not computers. So when humans are talking, it is personal, right? So there is some of that, and I don't take it too seriously.
Yeah, but ideally there shouldn't be any of the personal stuff because that gets so messy so quickly, like all the little slights and the you're stupid or you don't, somebody like it's happened earlier. I think Daisel's in here. We don't have to go all into it, but like Daisel was debating with Lion and Lion's not here either, but Lion said something like, oh, you're just being incoherent. You're being incoherent. And it's like, now somebody might think, oh, that's not really like a full blown, but I mean, it kind of is. Like if you're going to say your whole thing and someone's just going to be like, you're incoherent, like that's not really responding to the point, So there's all kinds of like minor ad homs and slights and character, it's like belittling and stuff. And yeah, you could say like, oh, we're just humans, don't be a snowflake, get over it. And I hear that. It's not like there is that perspective of don't be a snowflake, just take it on the chin kind of thing. But it heightens emotions. And the thing is, when there's an audience listening, you're kind of painting the opponent in some way, And so if you're always like trying to step on their character and degrade them, put them down, it's going to play into the overall kind of presentation of it. And to me, I guess like a really clean debate shouldn't really be, that's why like when you're playing basketball, you can't just pull out like a dagger and just start knifing the person. Like there's certain etiquette that you have to have. And in debate, I think there's a certain etiquette of like not attacking the person and really attacking the argument, because then that makes it the cleanest discussion. Then everybody listening can really have their intellectual mind like right on the topic, right on the content. Yeah, if there is a fallacy, maybe it needs to be called out and kind of addressed, but hopefully that's brief. And then there's a ruling that's made and then boom, you move forward. So I just think that's the cleanest. And then the intellectual capacity of the actual discussion, we can actually get to the knowledge, the data, the information, rather than, this whole kind of evaluation of like how the person's character is being, somewhat assassinated as the debates are happening, or both people's characters are being constantly like degraded, while the thing is happening. It's sort of like interference in a way.
And that's
I
the
agree. There
focus,
shouldn't
right?
be any
The
insult
focus is
in any
towards
type of
the
debate.
person, though.
I think
There
it
shouldn't
is
be
one
any type of
substance.
insult in a debate. I agree with that. But an ad hominem fallacy is when you do not address the argument at all and you just insult the person. So like insults are a bad thing etiquette wise, but it's a little bit different.
The reason it happens is because the person realizes they're wrong. So the only thing they can do is lash out.
Yeah, they can attack the person's character, motive, or the traits of the person, like by saying they think they're so much smarter than everybody, or they just do that as a tactic. Like they can attack the character, like Left Lane and Cole did. That would be an ad hominem fallacy. And then when asked for their reasoning, they just don't say anything, just make bases.
I'll give you my reasoning.
But you understand how throwing an insult in the mix actually changes your argument, the focus of your argument towards the character of the person. So there's no way around it. Once you insult somebody, your argumentation, everything that falls after that, the focus point is on that insult.
What if your argument is that they have shitty reasoning?
Yeah, it's not the actual topic you're discussing. It's away from the topic, and it's a focal point on the person. So it's like
if your argument is that they have
it's an
shitty
add-on.
reasoning.
And it works the same way with fallacies. Once you call a fallacy, all the focus is on fallacies, and it's completely lost on the topic. And
what if
from
your
then
argument
on,
is that they
usually
have
people
shitty
forget what they're
reasoning?
talking about to begin with. But I think Jesse's been wanting to get in for a while.
No, actually, but you have to call out the fallacies. Otherwise, the conversation just goes downhill because the person is speaking fallaciously.
You could try and explain how it's fallacious instead of like calling out like this is a fallacy and this is what the fallacy is. You can try and work them through, because that usually seems to go, like people usually seem to be more receptive towards that. You explain how it's fallacious, right? Instead of calling it, because once you say it's a fallacy, they get defensive. So you try and work them through it so they can come to that conclusion. But sometimes people just check out. They don't get that they're being fallacious. So then you're left with one option. Tell them this is the fallacy. Figure out, go learn about this fallacy, and then you'll understand my point.
What if your argument is that they have shitty reasoning?
Well, what would the shitty reasoning be?
In this case, or you said it's...
No, I mean, that would be the point. You'd have to address what that shitty reasoning is and why it's shitty to begin with. Not just that they have it, because that's just saying all your reasoning is shitty.
But you could also just give the stronger reasoning. You could give the stronger reasoning, though, or the stronger argument. Like instead of like saying how their thing is this, that, the other, you could just come in and be like, hey, here's the argument, here's the truth, here's what I'm putting forth, that kind of thing. Instead of, well, I mean, yeah, there's different ways to see that. I mean, if you're trying to like kind of break down what they're saying, but you see what I'm saying? Like you could kind of bypass that and just be like, just speak a truth or put an argument forward that has, solidity behind it, rather than trying.
You would just basically assert it. Right? You would just basically assert your reasoning is bad. Right? You wouldn't just say you're wrong about everything. You would say, here's the error in specific in your reasoning. Here's how you're using the error. And then you give them a chance to address the error and then make a better argument. You can't argue against a fallacious argument. It doesn't have enough traction to even grab any ground. All you can do is say like, well, you're saying that, right? It has nothing. A fallacious argument doesn't have pulp. It doesn't have the premise, the conclusion. It's not sound. So you get
Well,
an
that's why
argument.
yeah. Sorry. Oh, sorry if I cut you off.
No, that was the end of it. You just can't address a fallacious argument, just like you can't address an insult. If someone just says
Well,
you're stupid.
That's the issue I was going to say. Like, just, I mean, we can move on for sure. But like, the thing is, like, that's the issue with it. For example, like the appeal to authority. An appeal to authority is saying that this is true because the authority said it. That's where there's a problem. It doesn't mean you can't use like data or things from an authority. Like, you could use their data as support of an argument you're giving. But to just say it's true because the authority says it's true, like, where do you go with that? You know, it's like, okay, well, the authority just says it, so that's your argument. Like, but you know, the point is, you're trying to get to what is true. Like, do you have data? Do you have something to back it? Or are you just saying because XYZ said it and they're the authority, that just means it's true? And it just leaves you like kind of bummed out. You're like, okay, well, where do I go with that? Like, I just have to blindly trust that authority. Like, I wanted to see the data. I wanted to hear the argumentation as to why their data supports the argument that might have multiple authorities or might have some personal experience as well, or might have a test that I can do. You know what I mean? Instead of like just trusting the authority, maybe there's more to it. And that's where it does need to be kind of confronted and brought up, because otherwise, like, there's just nowhere to go. You can't even really respond to it. You know, unless just everyone in the debate just wants to say, okay, we'll just trust that authority, and that's the reason it's true. That's why like appeal to authority is problematic if it's used in that fashion.
Yeah, because that's just Pokemon battles, right? My authority says this, your authority says this. My dad could beat up your dad.
And it's just like when you get somebody says, "Oh, you've committed a fallacy," and you say, "No, I haven't," and you try to explain that you haven't, and your reasoning, and they continue to say that you have. Okay, who are they to always think that they are so great at literature and debates that they can tell you your reasoning and where you're wrong, even when you're trying to tell them your reasoning? And that's what
You're
goes
trying
on a
really
lot
hard.
of times in here.
Yeah, but Cole,
Yeah,
see,
you're
for
really
me, if I'm using a fallacy, like, please tell me. Like, I want to know, you know, as soon as
Yeah.
possible. Now, if I'm in a heated thing, maybe I might be a little more defensive than I should be. You know, maybe in the moment I might be a little heated or something. I'd try to do my best, but I'm just saying, like, if there's a fallacy, like, let me know. I want to know, because if I'm being fallacious, I want to clear that up, and I maybe need to reformulate what I'm saying or think further about it. So, I mean, to me, I want to know, but at the same time, like, it'd be good to have it be respected, like, not to have the fallacy used as a tactic, but to be used as something productive. And this is where, like, if we had like a full, like I said before, if there's an audience of 10,000 people listening, and the winner of the debate gets $1,000, and you have, you know, so there's a prize pool type thing, and you have, you know, a panel of 8 judges, and one of them is sort of the main judge or whatever, and then you have like a sort of like in a court case where you have the judge and the jury and so on, and it's really structured, that's where it'd be ideal. Because then if someone calls a fallacy, they say, boom, it's a fallacy. Then it goes right to the judge. Okay, fallacy has been called. The fallacy is, boom, he reads it off. And okay, support why it is a fallacy. Boom, the guy says that real quick. And then it goes to the guy who did the fallacy. Okay, can you rebut that? And then he gets a chance. And then within a few back and forths, there's a calling. It's either approved, you know, sustained, or overruled, and that's it. And then there's a point given, or however, if there's a system like that that's in place, and then it continues on, you know. So that is the most ideal. Whereas, yeah, on a more kind of informal, somewhat open panel, you know, like if we're doing this like in terms of like a 24-hour open panel live stream, then yeah, it can get a little bit more hectic, and if there's not the exact structure. But I think for this phase of where we're at, could still be productive, all the information that's being put forth and so on. But yeah, I mean, the structure is more ideal. I know we've been on this for a bit. If anyone else has response, I mean, Rigor did have a topic, but I think Jesse was asking about the pragmatic fallacy, ironically, because he was typing in text chat. So, Jesse, do you want to bring that up?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I'm trying to understand what exactly the claim is that was pragmatically fallacious. If the only requirement is that we know it's true because it works, then 3 + 3 = 6 is a pragmatic fallacy, because we know it's true because it works. So
No, it's not how we know it's true. We know it's true because of logical necessity, the definition of the terms, and the identity of the numbers. It has nothing to do with it's true because it works. It is also true. It also does work. It's not only true because it works.
But how do we know it's true if we were unable to test that it worked?
Yeah, saying in practice, right? It's pretty much putting the cart before the horse.
But how do we know?
Wait, but I kind of know what. I'm sorry, I know what you're getting at though, Jesse. I've thought about this too. So like, you know, if I was to say, oh hey, you know, the engine in this Ferrari, you know, works really well, like that, you know what I mean? Like that can't be fallacious because something works, like mechanically, or. So I kind of know like what you're hinting at, Jesse. So I don't know. Do you want to continue what you mean?
Well, so what was Embo's claim that was fallacious pragmatically, in some way that 3 + 3 = 6 is not pragmatic? Because the fact is, if we have no way to test the 3 + 3 = 6, then we have no way to know that it's actually true. We can test it. It does work. We do know it's true. But we all agree that that's not the pragmatic fallacy. So what was it that Embo is claiming that did qualify for the pragmatic fallacy?
Yeah, so 3 + 3 = 6 is true. Arithmetic works. 3 + 3 = 6 is not true just because it works. It's true because arithmetic works.
Yeah, this
It's
is
true
not
because
understanding
logic.
fallacy.
Okay, so
Pragmatic
what?
fallacy.
So what
This
was?
is a weird way to like shoehorn into the conversation, though.
So what was Embo's claim that was fallacious pragmatically?
Oh my. That you'd have to remember the wording. I'm not sure.
Was it about his religion, his church?
About 45 minutes ago on the live stream. I don't remember.
Whatever he got called out for the pragmatic fallacy for.
Well, there's definitely nuance to this. I mean, I'm fine.
There's a proof of sphere, but I'm not interested in having any type of conversation with Jesse.
I mean, we've been on this for a while, but I actually think what Jesse's bringing up, I mean, I have some questions, I think some clarity that could be helpful with the pragmatic fallacy and how it's used, but we either could go into it now or not. But I mean, Jesse, because I hear what you're saying, like if something works, that means it could be true. So how could that be fallacious? But something could work, but also not be true. Like for example, math could work in a certain way if applied to a certain theory. That doesn't mean the theory is true. And that's what was being discussed with Embo. We were talking about relativity and gravity and math, and how he was saying that, oh, if flat earthers knew the math, they would just believe it's a globe. And then I said something like, okay, well, are you saying then that there's something in the math that is exclusive to a globe, like proof? Even though I know in mainstream science they don't want to say, you know, that there things can be proven. But I mean, it's essentially what he was sort of alluding to is that if you knew the math, then you would believe it's a globe, which means, okay, there's something in the math that's exclusive to the globe. And then we were bringing up, you know, how it's applied, and that math is like a language. It can be applied in different ways, you know, and I was trying to get to like, does he have something exclusive? And then he kind of shifted to like celestial navigation and angles and that type of thing, which is like obviously different than kind of gravity and relativity. So from what I remember, I mean, you can go back and listen, but there was kind of, I'm not trying to call him out for that. He's deaf and he's not in here. So to me, I felt like it was maybe a little bit of a sidestep, or it was like a topic change a little bit onto a different thing. And then we just didn't really get into the details of the celestial navigation. But I mean, Jesse, in general, can you hear what I'm saying there? That like I hear what you're saying, that if it works, then that doesn't mean it's a fallacy if it has something that's true. But at the same time, there's certain ways in which like the semantics, it's like the difference between the semantics and pragmatics, and then the application of it. And there's a fallacy in there. But I also kind of hear what I think you're alluding to is that it doesn't necessarily mean it is a fallacy. So I think it's just more of a nuanced one.
Yeah, it is true. It does work, but it is not only true because it works. To state that I know this is true because it works is a pragmatic fallacy. But that's not the case with 3 + 3 = 6. That's true for different reasons, and it also works.
Well,
and the thing that works is not the statement. The thing that works is the arithmetic. Like 3 + 3 = 6 doesn't quote unquote work. It's the arithmetic, the epistemological basis.
But even if it is true, if nobody anywhere, anytime had any way to test it to see if it worked, that wouldn't make it not true. But
yeah,
you wouldn't know that it was true. So you wouldn't know that it was true. So you can't say that it's not a fallacy to say that without having tested it. Your only way to actually know that it is true is to test it and find that it works.
The fallacy is, this is true. I know it's true because it works. You're trying to add confusion to the conversation. The thing that works is not the statement. The thing that works is the thing underlying, which is the arithmetic. And the 3 + 3 = 6 is not true because arithmetic works. It's true because the definitions of 3 and 6, the identity of them, and logical derivation has nothing to do with it working.
Okay,
Can I address Jesse for a sec after this? I've got a way to put it.
I mean, we can find an element of, or a feature of reality that isn't just a definition of mathematics. Let's say you flip a quarter 1,000 times. Statistically speaking, we know that it'll land heads about half the time and tails about the half time, right? That's just physics. That's just how reality is. But is it a fallacy of me to say that it's true because it works?
Yes.
It's just probability. Like it's a little bit convoluted, but yeah, you're basically saying
simply is a
probability
fallacy.
is reality.
If you say it's true because it works, it's a fallacy. If you say this is evidence that it's true, that's different. You're saying like, look, I'm testing it. I'm justifying the truth value of it. That's different than dogmatically stating or baselessly asserting it works, so therefore it's true.
Yeah, I think this is a pretty. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, so basically, you don't have a problem with me saying that I have extreme evidence that it's true based on numerous trials of it working. It's just that I can't say it works, or it's true because it works. I have to.
Yeah, because that's not an argument. That's an reasoning.
I have to specify that I consider it to be true with an extremely high but not infinite confidence level, right?
Yeah, now you're making it seem like you have to run through these semantic circles just to make a truthful statement, but it's very simple actually. You're making it more confusing. It's very simple. The statement, I know it's true because it works, is a fallacious statement. If you say, I've done testing on this and this seems to be the case, that's not a claim. Also, that's not a claim with justification.
I think there's a lot of complexity to this one. Like, I'm looking here. I looked this up on this page. It says there's two forms of this. There's appeal to practicality and semantic misrepresentation. I mean, we could probably do a whole hour just going through this whole fallacy, and it may be useful too because it's connected to a lot of things. Like the Foucault's pendulum processes. It works, quote unquote. Let's just say for this that it does process. Therefore, Earth's a globe. Doesn't mean Earth's a globe. Anyway, that's affirming the consequent. But there's a lot of ways in which this is like comes up in a lot of these discussions. But I'll just give you this one example for the appeal to practicality. The example is if believing in ghosts helps you cope with grief, then ghosts must exist. So that's an example. If believing in ghosts helps you cope with grief, then ghosts must exist. That'd be a version of the fallacy. So just because believing in ghosts maybe helps somebody cope with grief, doesn't necessarily mean ghosts exist. So there's a semantic thing of like, oh, if for that case, the person believing in ghosts. So that's like the truth versus utility. There's utility to that. Like, oh, somebody believes in ghosts, therefore it helps them cope with grief, but that doesn't necessarily mean ghosts exist. So it's the truth versus the utility. The utility of it is, yeah, that guy's got a nice little thing. He's getting helped out by the fact that he believes in ghosts. It's helping him cope with, his grandfather died or whatever. But that doesn't mean that ghosts actually do exist just in that argument. So that's just one example.
And nor does it mean that believing in ghosts would necessarily help somebody else feel better or whatever.
Perhaps, yeah.
Right. So like if you say the globe model is sufficient for GPS calculations, it doesn't follow that it's necessary or exclusive. That would be sound. But if you say GPS only works because Earth is a globe, since GPS works, Earth is a globe, that's a fallacy.
And with the celestial navigation that was part of that when Embo was speaking, I mean that's a complex one too. We could probably go into that in depth at some point. But just because you could use celestial navigation assuming Earth's a sphere doesn't actually mean that Earth's a sphere. Now I know there's nuance to that though, because you would think that it wouldn't be as accurate, or that you'd have to get more fixes to kind of get your headings if it was to be using a globe model but it not actually be a globe. But it could still work, quote unquote. Like you could have a completely planar Earth, like even in a video game, if you don't want to think of it as real reality. You could have a planar world, and you could use a globular model in your mind and in your calculations for celestial navigation, and you could still get to places. Now it might not be quite as accurate, or like I said, you might have to keep getting additional fixes. But that's kind of what the example with Embo was, and I think there's like arguments to be said in that too. So just because celestial navigation, quote unquote, works to some level, does not mean that it proves the Earth actually is a sphere.
Right. You'd have to exclude the other thing, and that just all you'd be proving is that if I presuppose a thing, then this is internally consistent with the thing that I'm presupposing. That doesn't exclude the not thing, which is what you're supposed to be doing. And yeah, that would be the consequence.
PhdPapaFlerf, were you trying to get in before? Go
ahead. Yeah, cheers. I just wanted to, because this conversation really boils down to philosophy, and you can get the answer to the question really easy if you want to look at your different paradigms in philosophy. So you've got pragmatism. So I'd ask Jesse to just do a quick Google search. What is pragmatism? Look at the pros and cons. And quite quickly you'll see what it is, and how math, even though it works, it doesn't have to represent reality. Because what you want to do, if you want to improve something to be reality, you have to go down the empiricism kind of philosophical route. So you want the thing, it seems like everyone's struggling to get this. You just need to look at your paradigms in epistemology, and you'll find exactly what, based on philosophy, exactly what people are getting at here, and you'll stop talking past each other. Yeah, so that's basically all I just wanted to address to Jesse, is just look at pragmatism, what it means in philosophy, and that's pretty much your answer, because the pragmatic fallacy comes directly from pragmatism itself. So.
But there's a difference between, like, say, you believing in ghosts and feeling, better as a result. That might not work for me. It might work the opposite for some people. But as far as, like, let's say I took 1,000 coins, I flip them all, and then I sort them heads versus tails, the two piles will be just about the same size every time. If you take 1,000 coins and flip them and sort them, again, it's the same thing for you. It doesn't matter who does it. So that kind of makes it more truthy, because it's the same for everybody, right?
But it doesn't make it true. Like the probability argument would be 50-50. But in reality, you can get 49-51. So we know the math is not reality.
Well, I didn't
probability argument, right?
I did not say that the two piles would be exactly identical. I said they would be about.
But that's what the math says. The math says that. So you have a great theory, you have a great probability argument, right? It's logical, it's consistent, but it's not depicting reality.
Yeah, reality, you would get the same result, like probably 99% of the time. So if you're basing it down to reality, then it's a non sequitur, I would say, in itself, because what we're discussing is how math reflects reality, and obviously you can add placeholders in math. And I think the conversation, what Gio said, we were talking about relativity, and if you're adding placeholders like dark matter to kind of prove the mass of the universe, and to affect the effects that you see in the sky, but you can't prove that that thing exists, then that's where you get into the pragmatic fallacy, because you can put a variable behind anything to kind of refine the math. Doesn't mean it's real.
Okay, so what evidence for an argument for a planar or flat Earth could you make that would not fall at the edge of the sword of the pragmatic fallacy?
You'd exclude the other thing.
Because I feel like
Yeah,
we're
the
kind
null hypothesis approach is a good way to do that.
because I feel like we're kind of misusing the pragmatic fallacy to include physics and math in such a way that no truth statement could actually be made or claimed or tested, even, because it would all
No, it's
be
the opposite, because if you're judging everything based on math and equations, and it's pragmatic because you are basing it on math, you're ignoring like the experimental side of things, and that's kind of where you're getting into. So which is what I said originally, you want to look at what pragmatism is, look at what empiricism is, look at the pros and cons of those philosophical epistemological paradigms, and you'll get your answer. And then you'll see that when we're discussing just like relativity, we're discussing just pure math, and it works because it's math, it's true because it works mathematically, then you're committing a fallacy.
Okay,
and that's all I'm saying.
Also, no one was using the pragmatic fallacy to exclude math, so I don't know why you're saying that.
Well,
explicitly, there's a negative when you ask that. So why are you now saying if we're using it wrong, if we're using it to exclude math? No one was doing that.
Well, maybe this will help. When Alan says...
Maybe you addressing what I said will help.
Well, since you cut in the middle of my sentence, I think I should be allowed to finish it. And if you want to ask me the question again, then I can address it. So when Alan says that the flat Earth matches closer than the globe Earth every time in the split regarding the celestial theodolite, is he using the pragmatic fallacy there? Because he's saying basically the celestial theodolite works.
Maybe instead of switching topics, you could address what me or what PhD said.
Well, if nobody has an answer to my question, what was your question to me, Galley?
So I specifically addressed what you said, and you claimed that the thing you were saying was going to respond to it. It didn't, and then I asked you to stay on topic, and you don't remember what I said?
Here we go again.
Which what happened? He's just fucking recounting what just happened. How it was a blatant disregard for his question.
So you just want to ham-hand another topic in. I addressed what you said, right? No one is excluding mathematics with the pragmatic fallacy. We said negative when you asked if 3 + 3 = 6 is a pragmatic fallacy. So I asked you, why are you saying that people are using the pragmatic fallacy wrong to exclude mathematics? Why did you say that?
Well, because my guess is that Ambo is probably making a mathematical geometrical argument, which is why I want to know if we think that Alan's argument regarding the celestial theodolite always working, always being closer to the flat Earth, I want to know if that also is a pragmatic fallacy.
So once again, you try to derail and change topics. The question again for the third time, why did you say that people were excluding mathematics and using the pragmatic fallacy wrong if they gave you a negative answer when you asked if 3 + 3 = 6 is a pragmatic fallacy? Why did you say you guys are doing a thing when people explicitly were doing the opposite thing? And I know you have your teeth sunk in, you want to redirect this to Alan and someone who's not even here, but please answer the question. It's not a hard one.
Yeah, it says, well, what I said was, it looks like. That means it looks to me like the way it's being applied, it vanquishes all truth as a category. So I'm trying to figure out how you guys are using this and defining it and what is not. And initially, it looked to me like you were using it to dismiss anything as a pragmatic fallacy if it was known to work or believed to work based, or known or believed to be true based on the fact that it worked. So now you've confirmed that. Hold on, dude.
How are we using it to dismiss anything as a pragmatic fallacy if we explicitly said a thing is not a pragmatic fallacy? You are just lying. This is why no one wants to engage with you. You're so deceptive.
All right, let's not do the personal thing. And you did cut him off. Let's let him finish, just for the etiquette reason.
Well, can I point out straw man if he's straw manning? He said it seems as if you want to dismiss anything as a pragmatic fallacy, but he's responding to people explicitly saying this is not a pragmatic fallacy. So how are we dismissing everything as a pragmatic fallacy if the basis for the conversation is that mathematics is not a pragmatic fallacy? So his whole point is hinged upon a straw man. It's hinged upon the opposite, actually, of what was being talked about.
Okay, but I actually kind of understand what he's saying partially too, though. I'm not saying I completely agree. I'm not trying to take sides, but I do kind of understand partly the logic. Jesse, can you agree that nobody said that we're throwing everything out and that you have to throw out mathematics? Can we just get over that part? You were just saying you're not pinning that on anyone. Can we just get clear on that?
Oh, absolutely. And the moment he cut me off, I was just about to say, I recognize that nobody is saying that 3 + 3 = 6 is a pragmatic fallacy. And I recognize that, and I appreciate that. I'm better understanding that now. The statistical thing with 1,000 flipped coins was deemed to be a pragmatic fallacy. And so now I'm trying to understand about would Alan's thing, or let's say I was using my theodolite the traditional way and using the globe method to measure the height to mountains, and it worked every time. It matched the globe Earth. Would it be a pragmatic fallacy of me to say, well, this always works, so therefore the globe must be true because I assume a globe in all my math and it works?
Let me ask you. I
Yes.
want to ask you a question. You've come to the conclusion 3 + 3 = 6 is not a pragmatic fallacy. Do you understand why?
Well, I don't understand why you guys think that's not, but the coin thing is, and the globe theodolite thing is, but Alan's theodolite thing isn't.
All right, I'll explain it. Ready? It's a physical transfer, right? You have math as a concept works. It's just fundamentally true. When you try to transfer that onto the physical world to justify the concept, that's where it starts to break down. That's
Okay.
when you run into the fallacious reasoning. Like saying,
All right.
I have like 3 apples, right? And I have another 3 apples. Now I have 6 apples. That's how I know 3 + 3 = 6. That would be fallacious. Because the math is just like the abstract, right? And it holds true in that realm. You're trying to transfer it over to the practical world.
Can I get in, Jesse?
Sure.
Unless you have an immediate response, but I'll try to be brief. I mean, this is kind of like contradictory, or it sounds contradictory, or it could be in some ways, because like, and I understand like, I mean, I'm also reading a bit more about this from a few different sources, and like Embo said he was going to go away and look into it. I might even need a little more time to kind of go over some of this more to fully get what's being described, because there is kind of a potential contradiction. Like okay, like this is an example here. This medicine must be good because people feel better taking it, so it's true. But it's like there could be a medicine that is actually making people feel better. That's not a fallacy. You know what I'm saying? Like there could be a chemical or whatever. Like if somebody has a sickness and they take oregano oil and they, kills the bacteria. I know that, that germ theory, etc. But I'm just saying if that's the case and they kill the bacteria and they get better, or a million cases like that, things like that. So, or like, pain or whatever, if you take some pain relief, ibuprofen or whatever, and your pain gets better, there's obviously something going on in the body there. It's not, so there's just sort of a fine line. Like, I mean, but Jesse, you can understand the thing of like, oh, if believing in ghosts helps you cope with grief, then ghosts must exist. Like you can see how that's fallacious. I just think there's a lot of nuance with this, because on the other flip side, what I kind of hear Jesse saying in a way is like let's say something works because it is true. Like let's use the old boiling water. I apply this amount of heat to distilled water in this container at this altitude, in this environment, at this temperature, all that stuff, and the water boils. And you're going to be like, okay, that proves that, adding heat to water makes it boil because it works. And the thing is, I would say, yeah, it does work and it's true. And you can make an argument about, heating water and having it boil. That's not necessarily a fallacy. So I just think there is some nuance here. Like it could work in reality because it's true. So it doesn't just
Can I just jump on an analogy quick? So
Principle.
can I just jump on an analogy quick? So I think I could explain it a little more clearly for Jesse. So let's say that for globe to be real, we need 6 apples. However, we can only see 5 apples. But in our math, we create a dark apple, and now we have 6 apples. So that would be committing like that. That's just a really simple example of how you commit a pragmatic fallacy. So you've just mathematically created an apple, but you've now got 6 apples. It matches reality. Mathematically, it's all sound. It all checks out. But we know this dark apple, we can't detect with any instrument. But even though it mathematically works, you could say it's true because it works mathematically. You can do engineering and you can do all this great stuff with it, but we can't detect this dark apple. So that's committing the pragmatic fallacy.
I think that would be more the fudge factor fallacy.
Well, so Jesse,
Anyway,
It was
Jesse,
more
the
the
point
fact
of
that
the
you were
analogy
deriving something,
was not
you're
the
backward
pragmatic
deriving
fallacy.
something.
Pointed out how you could say that and it's not. So with Gio's example with the oregano oil, if you said this medicine works, therefore it is good for me, that would be invalid reasoning, because the effectiveness of it doesn't say like the value or the goodness. What about like side effects, long-term harm, risk-benefit trade-offs? So that would be a non sequitur and be grounded in pragmatism. A thing can work and still be bad for you. But if you said this medicine effectively treats this condition in people with my symptoms, and the evidence shows its benefits outweighs its risks, therefore it's reasonable to conclude it's good for me, that's not a pragmatic fallacy. That's not even a deductive argument. It's abductive. So there's a difference between coin flips seem to be 50-50, and my evidence for it is I've done 1,000 flips, and for the most part, I get a 50-50 spread. Those two things are different things. So to just say, oh, the coin flip was considered a pragmatic fallacy would mean you didn't hear what I said about that. And then before, when you said the 3 + 3 = 6, we didn't exclude that as one, would also mean you didn't hear what I said when I addressed that too.
Yeah, all you have to do is add the context to your question or to your statement, and that's going to elaborate. So if I said, if I walk north in a direct heading and I don't stop and I just keep going in a direct heading, I will come back to the same position where I started. And was that a pragmatic fallacy? Well, you could say it's a globe, therefore it's a globe, right? So it's not pragmatic fallacy at all. But you have to forget, don't forget that there's a caveat or a context to the scenario that you have to consider, because I could say, well, maybe it's not a globe, but it could be a cylinder.
Well, so
Totally different shape than the globe, and you can still perform the same actions and get the same results. So you need to add context, right? And caveats as well. There might be a caveat that you didn't find out about.
And it's not going to be a one-to-one. It would be abductive at best.
So if I were to take one of those 36-inch rubber Swiss balls or exercise balls or whatever you want to call it, and take a yardstick and then another ruler and meticulously measure the drop over distance along the surface of that Swiss ball, I could, using math and geometry, determine the radius of that ball, and then by turning the yardstick 90 degrees and measuring the radius in the other axis, I could determine that not only was it curved like a cylinder, it was actually curved like a sphere, and I could measure the radius of that sphere, right? Would that be the pragmatic fallacy because it worked? Anybody could do the same procedure on the same sphere and get the same
If
results.
the math is true,
No, it's not.
because
That's just an
did this,
empirical
then yes,
measurement.
that's pragmatic.
That's just an empirical measurement in geometric inference. That's not an appeal to usefulness. The fact that you don't understand what the fallacy is, and you're coming up with scenarios to ask if they fit the profile of it. Can you define the pragmatic fallacy, or the usefulness or practicality fallacy?
It's basically like Geo gave the example of saying, for example, that believing in ghosts helps you cope with grief or whatever.
Therefore, it goes true just based on that. Yeah. But can you see though, Galley, like what he's saying? I feel like what he's pointing out though is, for example, you know how people say, oh, we use the Earth practically as flat and stationary for building, for roads, for construction and bridges and stuff. Now, from the perspective that the Earth is planar and stationary, that would not really be fallacious to be like it works to use level as level, et cetera, to treat the Earth as level because it is level. You know what I'm saying? So like there is a way, and like I said with the water boiling thing, whereas I think the pragmatic fallacy has to do with like I said, there's just nuance to it. Like that it's like just because there's a practical benefit doesn't necessarily mean it's true. It just seems like you need more backing it. You know what I mean? Than just the statement that it works in a way.
So if you said it works
need to have
by
context.
if you said it works by treating the Earth as planar, horizontal, stationary, therefore it's true that it's horizontal, planar, stationary, that would be a pragmatic fallacy. And the example with the rulers and the ball, if you said this geometric method gives consistent results and is useful, therefore this ball really has that radius, right? The method's success, it works, and the truth of the conclusion, it really has that radius. If you conflate those two, that's the fallacy.
The math stands on its own. Like that's the key. The principles of the math stand on their own. When you try to validate the math through the practical means, it's when you can easily, quickly run into that fallacy.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
It's between this model is true because it's useful, and given these measurements, this geometry implies this radius.
Yeah, but it just seems like it depends on what, like if you're using math, which is abstract, and then trying to apply it to something physical, that's like ripe for a pragmatic fallacy, which is when it came up earlier. But I mean, I kind of hear what Jesse's saying. Like I don't even know, Jesse, if I'm kind of steel manning the general thing you're saying, but in my mind, I can see like the fine line of potential contradiction with this. Like for example, if I said my table is 6 feet long because I took a measuring tape out and measured it 6 feet, there's a practicality to using the measuring tape to measure it 6 feet. And yes, it works. Putting the measuring tape works for 6 feet, but it is really 6 feet. So that wouldn't really be a fallacy
Well, yeah,
necessarily.
that's because now you're going into the philosophical thing that PhdPapaFlerf
Yes.
was talking about. With
You're
now you
going
have
into empiricism.
empirical examples.
Right. So there's a
Gonna-
difference between empirical testing and appealing to usefulness, or geometric inference and instrumental validation, conditional
Gonna-
conclusions and absolute truth claims. Like these are super different things. These are different categories, right? So on one hand, you have empirical testing, you have inferences of the geometry, and a conditional conclusion, right? Using this geometric relationship, these measurements imply this thing, assuming the model applies. That's a conditional conclusion. It's not an absolute truth claim, like, oh, because we know that we can do stuff assuming the Earth is flat, therefore the Earth is flat. That would be an absolute truth claim. That's not a conditional conclusion.
So how big can the Swiss ball be before it's no longer a geometric inference with me using the exact same method, and it then becomes a fallacy for me, a pragmatic fallacy for me to say, look, my measurements of drop over distance do give this particular radius.
Is there
Yeah,
any
it's-
chance you could steel man what I just said?
Well, it seems like, okay, if he's going to do that, but I just want to say real briefly, it seems like this is very closely related to begging the question. And that's why begging the question can be very kind of nuanced and a fine line as well. And real quick, if you want to steel man what he said, Jesse, after this, but I'll just read this real quick. I just found this paper, and this is the abstract. The aim of this paper is to make clear how and why begging the question should be seen as a pragmatic fallacy, which can only be properly evaluated in the context of dialogue. Included in the paper is a review of contemporary literature on begging the question that shows the gradual emergence over the last 20 years or so of the dialectical conception of this fallacy, etc. So anyways, there's this whole paper written on it. So
Yeah,
it's
the
interesting.
pragmatism though is a bit broader than that, because whereas like what you've explained, you could just be begging like certain aspects of a criteria. The pragmatism, like in epistemological sense, you've got a whole framework of explaining reality. So it's just not that this one little thing. It's kind of like the pillars that's building the whole, like your whole knowledge claim, so to speak.
Right.
So
Sometimes
it's
it is
slightly
begging the question,
broader.
sometimes it isn't.
Hey, Ricksky, you still trying to get in?
Yeah, I think the point seems to come down. Like if you've got that Swiss ball, you say that you've come up with some math to describe it, you transpose that, and then you get someone else to come up and build or make the exact same Swiss ball, right, somewhere else in a different location. You need to find out and be able to compare those two Swiss balls together now. So that's where this sort of leap starts occurring, that unless you can actually put those Swiss balls side by side, you could never possibly truly prove that you've got the math absolutely right.
And you
But,
can't
I
do it
mean-
optically either, because there's too many variables to consider, and we've got optics to consider as well. So just because something looks like it appears one way, and you're disregarding all the optical effects that could cause that to appear that way, even if they're all averaged out and you come to kind of like an Earth radius of X, then you're still committing the fallacy because you're not accounting for all variables, and not all variables have been like empirically measured. So like refraction between, like we said, distances, how much refraction is there? Have we actually measured the refraction, or are we just inferring what refraction must be to assume a radius of X?
So are we agreeing then that if, I'm not asking us to agree that we have a way to accurately measure drop over distance over global distances, but do we agree that if we did have a way to accurately measure drop over distance on Earth at great distances, then we could measure it, and if we then measured the drop over distance in different directions and locations, just like the Swiss ball, we could infer correctly the radius, and that would not be a pragmatic fallacy.
What a waste!
I need to know more details of what you're actually doing. Like, what are you doing? Like, what's your method?
It's such a
use
waste of
tech
words.
here.
If you were a giraffe, of course you'd be a giraffe. You're not. So why are you asking? You seriously wasting our time with this nonsense? Take your sophistry and shove it up your nose. It's a waste of time.
How's it going, Elisha? It's good to see you.
Elisha, no, not necessarily.
What's the Swiss ball, by the way?
What's that?
Swiss ball.
It's a rubber inflatable ball that's about almost a meter in diameter, or maybe a little less, and they're used for like exercises and stuff. You like can sit on them or bounce on them.
Yeah.
Therapy balls, maybe. I don't know.
Medicine ball.
Medicine, yeah, medicine ball. I think I've seen them called that.
I mean, it just seems like with this, for example, like the it works thing being practical, it could work because it's true. Like I mentioned, the boiling water. You know what I mean? Like that it works and it's true. So it just seems like I keep saying, there's kind of just nuance with it.
Yeah, but there's empirical data to back that. That's the key difference.
Right. Yeah. So it depends on the premise. Like
The other thing is, if it's true, it doesn't matter whether it works or not. It's true. Whatever the work is in that particular application is completely irrelevant.
And that's what the pragmatism paradigm kind of suggests. It says as long as it works, it must be true. But then you can get into
which is inherently retarded, because you wouldn't need to go to, oh, it works, therefore it's true. if it was flipping true. You would just show that it's true and move on with your life.
But how
But
would
you
you
might,
show?
you might want to show it's true by the fact that it works, though. That's the thing.
Yeah,
You might
exactly.
want to,
No, you might want to for other reasons, but to simply demonstrate truth, it's got nothing to do with anything outside of that. All the applications of the truth, all the ways in which the truth manifests himself are irrelevant. It either is or it isn't.
But like if I told you a bunch of information about how an internal combustion engine works, and I just explained it, oh, there's metal and oil and gas and a carburetor and all this stuff, and I didn't really show you it working, you would have a certain, like, how would you know that it's really true what I'm saying? But if I fired one up in front of you and now you're watching this thing, boom, there's strength to showing that it's working because it is.
That would be a type of category error because you're not talking about a mechanism in function, in the state of functioning. You're talking about an entity or a thing. So you could simply say it's true that this is a combustion engine, whether the combustion engine is functioning or not, because you can have a non-functioning combustion engine, right? You see the slight category error. It doesn't apply to the question of the Earth, because the Earth isn't. We're not dealing with the fact that it's functioning in a certain manner. We're dealing with the shape claim, the basic nonsense that we've been dealing with for a decade now. People can't get their head around that.
There was also a lot of trial and error as well when building this kind of stuff. It wasn't that they had a prediction, they went out and that was it. They magically had an engine. There was a lot of trial and error over hundreds of years of a learning process, some of which people don't even understand yet, but they know that these phenomena occur in nature, so we accept it. So, yeah, like the electron, for example, like if that's real or not, well, it's just kind of conceptual, but we can conceptualize that and have real outcomes from it.
Right, that's a really good example because the electron, depending on the history in which you're evoking, right? The electron manifestation is something that actually manifests, but the narrative surrounding it is nonsense. So you can demonstrate the manifestation and then go, therefore, the narrative that we've applied to the electron is true. That's another example of pragmatic fallacy. But when you actually get down to the nitty gritty, you go, no, we're not. Well, there's no issue whether this particular manifestation is present or not. It's how you're describing it, how you're explaining it. You're retroactively rewriting the script. And in this case, it's entirely nonsense because the guy who came up with the electron and coined the term, he defined it completely differently to how people use it now, which is convenient for me because I like that topic. But it's a good
you explained it really well. And it's down to interpretation as well. Like that's just another layer on top of it. So it's like you say, yeah, you can, even though we can examine things in nature and we can kind of understand like what's happening, it's our inference or like our kind of how we've idealized that in reality could vary depending who you talk to.
Well, that's where, because this whole thing started with Embo, we were talking about relativity and the math, and then you talking about celestial navigation, and so that was kind of ripe for a pragmatic fallacy in that range of how mathematics is applied, and so on. Because I guess
they relied on conceptual models to kind of make it work.
Can I ask a question about?
Well, that's where
the ellipsoid. So
that's why this is closely associated with begging the question. Something works, therefore it's true. It's that kind of doing it in reverse. Like, oh, the pendulum precesses, therefore Ursa globe. And it's like, wait a minute, how'd you get to just because the pendulum's precessing doesn't mean it's Ursa globe? That's a leap. Which is where you get the affirming the consequent and begging the question. And it seems like the pragmatic fallacy is closely related to those. So it kind of depends on what your premise is that you're starting with. Because some of these other ones we're saying, like, if you measure your table to be 6 feet, that's different because you have something empirical, physical, tangible, and you can replicate it. That's different than a claim that's using some kind of like either abstract or some kind of or belief involved. And then, the practicality of that, like the example of somebody believes in ghosts, therefore, they're able to cope with grief or whatever. It doesn't mean ghosts exist. But that one is a good example because it's using
that's a good example.
It's like metaphysical and doesn't have. It's very different than like water boiling or measuring a table or something. Yeah.
In terms of a generic way of discussing it, when it comes to conditional conclusions, the conclusion would have to be exclusive and demonstrated independently to be exclusive before the conclusion is ever taken seriously. Does that make sense?
Also, the pragmatic fallacy comes from pragmatism, so it's probably a bit before when people started to describe this stuff through like begging the question fallacies. So it's probably just a different way to describe a similar thing. So there's some crossover there. So I won't get caught up that this seems like there is crossover there. That therefore, how do I categorize each one in its own little thing? Because there will be crossover because we're dealing with logic at the end of the day, and it's not every criteria is boxed in its own like rigid place, so to speak.
Because you don't necessarily need to name something in order to highlight that it's erroneous. You just need to demonstrate sufficient flaws in the reasoning. The only reason names are useful is because it fine-tunes the category, and it serves better for people who are actually trying to refine their arguments. So like, okay, this is the type of application in which I'm messing up. Let me remix that and not make that same error. Because for instance, if you had a legitimate interlocutor who's actually trying to develop a sound argument, it could simply be that that he's not putting together the the argument that even though the reality is sound, he's just not expressing it correctly, right? Because you can use rhetoric to express a truth. Now, you've expressed it in a rhetorical manner which would be erroneous and fallacious, but that doesn't mean it's not true. But obviously, in this case, we're dealing with sophists and nonsense. But did you understand what I said about? Did you understand what I said about the conditional conclusions? The moment any conditional conclusion is evoked, they have to be explicitly exclusive, and they have to demonstrate that without a shadow of a doubt, because otherwise it's erroneous.
Yeah, like a direct link from the cause and effect, rather than something's happening and then I'm just going to apply some kind of a pragmatic outcome to the original cause without actually making the link between the cause and effect.
It's like the shadows and the sticks and all that nonsense. It's like, well, that only works if you grant the exclusivity to the globe. But have you demonstrated that that's an exclusive situation? We already know that that's not the case, but it's a good example to make the point.
Jesse, I did talk at the same time as you before, and then you're typing in chat something to Elisha. So did you want to get in?
Oh, thanks. Yeah. So Elisha, you had said something about if something's true, it's true, regardless of whether it's been, shown to work. But my question was, and I think probably Gio kind of asked this to you also, maybe, not to put words in your mouth, Gio, but anyway, if something hasn't been shown to be true, how do you know that it's true, that it's true, that it's true? Just someone told you and you believe them? How do